Generally, I start hearing a character first, and then I start working through that. It's a very odd thing to say. I heard a writer said that it was kind of possession, and it is like that. I start kind of talking to the character, and I'm talking like the character, talking to myself basically, like enacting the character. Like if I'm a king, I'm like, blah, 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 and like that. And then if I'm a servant, I do the servant part, like, oh no, don't hit me, that kind of stuff all around the house, which looks really odd if you're watching it. It's like, what's going on? But it helps me kind of figure them out. Because I can hear them talking, and then that allows me to figure out their mannerisms and some of their psychology, and then I can layer up more stuff on top of that. I can start asking questions and probing about, well, what does this mean? If they're very vain, how does that, where does that come from? How does that manifest? But it all starts with talking it through, basically. So it's a type of play acting, I think. And I used to do that when I was a little kid. I was a very weird, odd kid. So, I was the kind of kid in horror movies that's like in a corner talking to himself, like the Red Room, the kid like that. Like, we're going to kill somebody tonight. Yeah. Like that? Yes, like that.
Yeah. When you've got a character like that who's in early 70s Mexico, are you thinking, are those lines that are coming to you initially in Spanish, even though you're going to write it in English, or are they coming to you in English at that moment?
It depends. Like with Velvet Was a Night, I was very happy when I saw the Spanish translation because I was able to make some corrections and some changes to the slang that they were using so that when it came out in Spanish, it was actual slang that might have been used in Mexico. And all the curse words came out, like all the...
There's a lot in that
There's
book.
a lot, there's a lot. But in Spanish is so much richer for curse words. So it was like just a lot more elaborate and baroque when it was in Spanish than when it was printed in English, and then it basically went back to Spanish. But with that one, I was thinking a lot of times when I was kind of doing Elvis, I was thinking in Spanish because he was cursing a lot and all that kind of stuff. And then I had to adapt some things and get a little bit poetic in some of the ways that he might say something, because in Spanish there was no direct translation of a certain slang term. So it became a little bit more different. And then going back in the translation, it's also looking at it again and saying, well, now how would he say it in Spanish? And so that one was kind of interesting, an interesting conundrum.
And what about like their, the products that they're seeing and the media, and like how do you immerse yourself in that historical moment?
Well, for Velvet Was a Night, there's a lot of music kind of that's sort of mentioned, and there's a playlist at the end of the book, and we talk about comic books. So I knew about the music of the era more or less because of my father, and we talked about music. But I went back and kind of dug deeper and looked more at some artists that I really hadn't listened to in a long time or really hadn't paid attention. Maybe he had mentioned them, but I really hadn't listened to them. So I went back and I was listening to that while I was working on it. And there were also some American artists, but especially the Mexican artists were some of the stuff that I was kind of listening more heavily.
Well, and I think I heard, maybe I read in an interview with you that one of the reasons that music started to sort of be infused into the novel was that you were reading the letters of a dissident who remembered the music that was playing when they were being beat up during this time. Yeah,
he remembered that the guards used to play very loud tropical music that really annoyed the dissidents that were in the cells. And so he remembered that, he associated that, like this loud music, with them getting beat up. And so at that point, although I hadn't wanted to include music because Signal to Noise, my first novel, was a lot about music, I knew I had to put it in. It was an important element of the time period. Music was being repressed in Mexico. People were not being allowed to listen to music. Basically, clubs had been closed down, and only certain American music was considered inappropriate, and rock and roll was also considered inappropriate. So I was trying to not put those elements in the novel, but they just, when I heard that interview, I knew that music was one of those big things that was kind of happening, and there was, it wasn't just about a political kind of rebellion, it was also about artistic rebellion happening at the same time. And they're tied together, obviously, but I was kind of trying to separate them, kind of go like, no, we're not going to talk about this, we're just going to talk about that, and then kind of both came together.